you do know who you are. You've just been taught to doubt yourself. There are so many forces in our world that try to convince us that we are nothing or that we shouldn't be around. And so as you're on this process of self-discovery, try to offload that sense of, oh, it's my fault that I don't know who I am. It's absolutely not. There are so many forces in this world that are getting you to try to conform. So remember that, and just know that like the answers are already within you, and you might have tools that help you unlock those understandings, but nobody can help you figure out who you are except for yourself, because you are you.
Yeah. Hi, Blair. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thanks for coming on She Comes With Baggage. I'm so excited you're here. I've been honestly counting down to this moment because you're someone that inspires me so much. And
Thank you so much.
I don't know, when we met, it was at the DNC and we were covering the Democratic National Convention, and it was just like go time.
It was chaos.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Awesome opportunity, but so much chaos. I was run down.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I was getting back. So I stayed with my friend, Alex Hall, who runs an amazing platform called The Bottoms Digest.
Okay.
All about like bottoming healthily and like food recipes and like just all types of awesome stuff, making sure you get your fiber. And thank God I had him like cooking for me. And like I was staying at his place. So I always had like a place to like rest. But there were so many times where I was just like, why don't they make makeup you can sleep in?
Yeah, honestly,
passing out.
You know how we were just talking about business ideas? That should be it. That should be it. Something you can sleep
makeup.
in. Yeah.
Yes.
And it rehydrates you while you sleep.
Right? Can we just
Period.
have some like hyaluronic acid? Like there's no reason
Someone
why.
should come up. It's going to happen eventually.
But until that, make sure
then.
you take your makeup off before you go to bed.
Yeah. So where are you from originally? Are you from Los Angeles?
Yes, I am. So
Wow,
I'm from
okay.
Altadena on both sides of my family.
Okay.
And then before that, my family's like from Louisiana, but I grew up in Pasadena.
Okay. I feel like that's very rare. Since I'm moving here, I feel like I've only met maybe less than 10 people who are actually from Los Angeles.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Los Angeles is a great place for people who are from other places.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think that it is rare. I think a lot of people are moving. I lived in New York for 3 years, but I had to come back because I feel like California and Los Angeles are the best.
And weather-wise, it's
unbeatable.
Unbeatable. Tell me about your cultural upbringing.
I am 8th generation Black American.
Okay.
And, you know, my dad's Black American. My mom is Creole, so French Creole from Louisiana, and Black American. And I feel like we just very much grew up like, it's just so weird. Like, you know, now they're having so many conversations around, you know, DEI and how we should ban that and how we have to get rid of critical race theory and da-da-da-da-da. We didn't have a lot of that when I was growing up, or at least it didn't seem that way. And yet we had, you know, such a rich and diverse way of learning about different communities and cultures.
Yeah.
Like when there was a kid at my school who was getting bullied post 9/11, his mom came in and taught us about Islam to like clear up the confusion. And today I'm Muslim. I've been Muslim for 10 years. I converted right before I graduated from college. And I just think the culture that I grew up in outside of ethnicity and race was really about acceptance and love and inclusion. And that could be making sure everyone was included when you had a birthday party, or it could mean everyone was included when it came time to talking about human rights and equality. And so I think those two things are a huge part of my cultures. But one thing that's so interesting is that I also feel like I grew up very American. And I feel like that's like a taboo thing to say. But
what does that
really
mean
true.
to you in the sense of growing up very, like, you love baseball or?
Yeah, like, no, going to like Dodger games and Laker games and celebrating, you know, the 4th of July and hot dogs and fireworks in the park. We would go to Lacey Park. And
there's a dominant Los Angeles culture as well.
There very much
is.
And I think that's a huge part of it.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's why sometimes folks feel disconnected. But also there was a lot of like Mexican and Latino culture that I grew up around, to the point where I think when I was a kid, I was so disappointed when my mom explained to me that like, actually, no, we're not Latino. And I was like, are you sure?
Yeah, please.
You know? Because I grew up speaking Spanish and like learning like nursery rhymes in Spanish. And I think that was a big part of my culture too. And I think that, you know, or like partaking in that culture is not necessarily my culture. But I remember like when Tumblr was around and like this term third culture kids was popular, I definitely related to that.
Yeah, Tumblr was my era. I wish we could bring that back, honestly.
Oh my
because
goodness.
We were just out there expressing ourselves through random reposts. I'm like,
I've heard it's
genius.
coming back. Like people are really upset with like, you know, a lot of these social media platforms. And so they're trying to come back to Tumblr. But it was a time, it was an era. but I think Tumblr and Skype had some of the biggest fall-offs.
Skype. Wow, I haven't heard that in forever. That's insane.
It was right there, ready to go with the pandemic, and then Zoom came out of nowhere.
Yeah, and now you have just Google Meets and Zoom, and I don't even want to hear those words because I'm like, it's just every day. I'm so triggered. I'm like, high blood pressure. Talk to me about your family. Do you have siblings? Or?
Yes, I do. So I have 5 siblings.
Okay.
And it's so funny because except for my younger sister, Chelsea, who also has her social media page, my older siblings are so private, like so private, so quiet, which I appreciate. I just can't relate to it because I like to put everything out there, I guess. And so we kind of have like some age gaps, but we also have a blended family.
Okay.
So my older siblings we have different parents, and we have the same dad. But it's like, and then my cousin Brittany, who's more like my sister Brittany because she grew up with us. And we just kind of grew up that everybody was all together. And so like my brother Brandon, for example, he would go to his mom's house during the weekends and then stay with us during the weekdays. So I thought everybody's brother did that.
Okay,
I thought it was just like, well, I remember going over to my friend Rachel's house and being like, why is your brother here?
Yeah.
And she was like, what do you mean? I was like, isn't going to go to his other mom's house?
They're like, what do you understand about?
Yeah, but I think it spoke to how normalized my parents worked to make, things that we might feel like were our differences or were difficult. Just part of life.
It didn't feel like it came from a place of hardship. It came from a place of seamlessness.
It was just like 100% seamlessness. It was just like, I have older siblings and we have like different moms. So like it was just how we were. And then it was great because then when I would deal with people who were like, you're weird, I'd be like, oh no, you're just mistaken.
Ooh,
like,
I love
clearly
it.
You're just misinformed or uninformed. And then I would just start explaining things, which is 100% what I do every day now.
I love that. And so I know, you're saying that you have, different parents. And when was your earliest introduction to maybe a realization about race or either racism? And, I know you grew up in a very diverse community. So what was that like for you?
So I was born and raised, in Altadena, moved to Pasadena. Then we ended up going to school in this area called San Marino, not as diverse. It was mostly white and then East Asian. And so me and my younger sister were the only Black kids. And there was like another kid from Egypt. And I was like, the Black people. And he was like, well, it's complicated with Egypt. And I was like, close enough for me. And so I think that having that background of like, you should share with your cultures, like you should appreciate other cultures, having that from such a young age was really beneficial by the time I got to the San Marino schools. And it's become so much better over the years. But I think during that time, it was like early 2000s, if not the late 90s, and just such a tense vibe. Is in hindsight, I did not realize, but it was a very conservative community.
Okay.
I was a child, so I was just like
hanging out,
I guess. I'm like, wow, I don't agree with that, but okay. And I remember the first time like I felt like I encountered race or racialization was when somebody at school was so intent on asking me what I was, and I had never been asked what race I was. I think up until that point, I think I must have been like 7.
Okay,
and like I knew I was Black, but like they didn't have like. And this is, or
Sure.
it was just like, this is who I am. But she just kept asking me what I was. And I was like, I'm Blair. Like, what is wrong with you? Like, I just felt like an alien from another planet coming in and somebody being like, what are you? And I'm like, I had an issue with the question. It's not that I don't understand the question. I'm just like, I'm a person. Like, and it was just so foreign to me because that's not how my worldview is shaped. Like, it wasn't like my parents raised me race blind or anything, but my parents definitely raised me that you don't like go ask somebody their name and then immediately what race they are.
Yeah. Well, first off, social cues, you know what I mean? Manners as well, but
but it was also like the type of vibe. It was like right when we just switched that school and I had people asking me like what kind of car my parents drove. And I was like, why?
So it's almost a lot of status situations.
A lot of status stuff, but like from a kid who didn't grow up that way. And so I was just like, why are these questions so freaking weird?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, also I would imagine at the age of 7 or 8, this is when you're younger than that, you have this like creative expression, this freedom of just having a big imagination and sharing, and all you want to do is be friends with everyone, right?
Yeah.
And then once you get to around the age of 7, that's when I almost feel like the adults in your life start making you think about certain things, either consciously or subconsciously. And then those kids go to school. And then that's when those questions come up, where I think that's also imposed from parenthood as well. I would think.
What's funny is about the car question is that I immediately just like name dropped like the fanciest car that my dad had. And I was just like, this. And then they were like, oh. And then they like respected me. And I was like, I don't want to be around that person because they have a weird value system. But I was still a kid. Like, I didn't have anybody telling me, like, somebody asks you that, they're, like, trying to make, like, a class-based status assumption upon you.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, like, I work a lot with parents and how, like, they raise their kids. And I think that if you raise a child to be, like, confident and to, like, you know, kind of understand themselves, when you do have people who try to, like, get their adult socialization through to them, they're just going to, like, reject it or not really absorb it because it's so outside of their value system and worldview. And so I remember I went to my mom and I was like, somebody at school kept asking me what I was. And my mom, who's, you know, mixed, she was like, oh, like she automatically knew what that was because she had that experience. And she was like, well, you can, like, you know, tell them that you're multiracial, that you're Black. You also don't have to answer. And I was like, well, I'm not going to answer because I feel like that's a weird question. And the person wasn't friends with me after that. But it was like, I think it was just like a very naive thing. But I can remember asking my dad, like, what the N-word was the first time when I was younger, and like him, you know, it was like such a kid way to ask. I wasn't like, I didn't wait till we were like sat down at the dinner table or anything. He was just like literally picking up one of my friends from school, and I was like, so Dad, what does this mean? And luckily it was before that friend got into the car, and he like explained it to me. Like, and he was also like, did somebody call you that? And I was like, and I don't even think I knew what it was. I was like, Dad, what is the N-word?
Okay, yeah.
I think it was because somebody at school asked me if I was allowed to say it because I'm Black. And so I think it was just this very, like, clumsy approach. Mind you, that wasn't the first time I had encountered race or racism. I think that was the first time I had encountered it from, like, outside the home from other people. I think that we had grown up, like, being, like, we would read books. Like, my favorite book growing up was If a Bus Could Talk, which was about Rosa Parks. And, you know, from the perspective of, like, children. And it's like the bus comes alive and tells the story of Rosa Parks' bus boycott. My parents really raised me to be proud of who I am. And so when I started dealing with people who were like, no, you shouldn't be, I was like, you're wrong.
It's beginning your self-discovery journey in a lot of ways because it's like, okay, now that sticks with me. Now I have to go home and question myself, lay up in bed at night. Like, what am I? You know what I mean? And it's like, it shouldn't be that hard, you know, of a question, but also when children do it, it's just like, and kids can be mean, you know? And
kids can be mean.
Like, if a kid asks me right now what kind of car I drive and I come up with like a Subaru or a Prius or a Jeep, they're like, lesbian. Lesbian. I'm like, yeah, you're right.
Dead.
That's funny.
But I feel like around that time where I was like figuring out race-related things was also when I was figuring out like sexual orientation-related things. And I feel like that's really hard for straight and cis people to understand because when you start talking about sexual orientation, I think a lot of people automatically think about sex. And for children, that's not usually the case. It's who you have a crush on, who you want to write Valentine's Day
like
cards
little butterflies.
to. You're like, wow, that person is super cute. And so's his sister. And I don't know what that means because I don't see a lot of representation of girls with girls. So I don't know if that's possible. And that's what it was for me. And it was like around that same time too.
Okay. And so what was your coming out journey like? Was that something that was ever evolving, or was it just like a throw it out there and see what happens, or kind of like self-confusion, or what would that look like?
I feel like it was similar to the situation with race. Was like I was very self-assured because that's how my parents raised me to be. But it was also like, I think because of the early 2000s and how taboo, you know, sex and sexual orientation and how conflated those two topics became, I felt like I needed permission. And so I think that's what a lot of young people experience when it comes to coming out, is not really coming out because they, you know, they might need validation, but I think a lot of it is just like, is this okay? Am I allowed to exist? Especially if you grow up in a maybe religious or conservative environment that tells you that you're going to hell all the time. Luckily, that was not my experience.
Even in a conservative space.
Oh, yeah. So I feel like when I was around 8, when I was in 2nd grade, I vividly remember I had a crush on this kid, and then I also had a crush on his sister. And that was like kind of like a, what does that mean? And then just like finding, you know, crushes on different, you know, characters in TV or in movies, especially like, you know, the princesses. I was like, well, I don't think any of the princesses are cute. I think that, you know, the princesses are cute.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know? And I think my parents like observed that, and they didn't really like say like, oh, well, no, boys were with girls and girls were with boys. They were just like, okay. And my mom 100%, she's like a social worker, so she probably clocked it early on.
She clocked it really early. You're like, why didn't you tell me? No.
Right? No, but she did. So when I remember getting kind of like derailed off this path of like self-understanding by the show Degrassi with the character Marco.
God. Yes.
Because Marco was like so conflicted about his queerness. And I think that is the case for some people, but I think having that as the only queer storyline was harmful. Because I was sitting up there being like, okay, if Marco's conflicted and should I be conflicted? I'm conflicted now, you know? And so I like remember I urgently came out to my mom as a lesbian because I didn't know what bisexuality was. And then my mom did. So my mom was like, well, you're bisexual. And I was like a little upset because I feel like it ruined my like ABC family moment.
Okay,
but
yeah.
It was true. And so I feel like even with that point, like I was just so comfortable in my queerness and my bisexuality after my mom kind of gave me this like seal of approval and validation that it was to the point where I remember like there was this one girl, and I really want to say her name, but I'm going to be a better person, who like, so she was a new student as well as my friend Sylvia, and Sylvia and I are both queer.
Okay.
And we didn't know that about each other yet, but this other chick was not, and she was actually homophobic.
Oh no.
And but I remember clowning on it. We like didn't clown to her face, but she was like, she got Purple Haze and Purple Rain confused. Okay. So we were talking about like Jimi Hendrix and Purple Haze, and we were like, yeah, and she's like, oh, Jimi Hendrix, I love Purple Rain, and we were like, what a poser. And then she turns around and decides to be homophobic to us. And she was like, you two, like, you know, you guys hold hands a lot or whatever. And we were just like, we're cutting her out the friend group. She don't know music and she's homophobic. We can't have
Next thing you know, she's going to ask you what kind of car you drive.
Right? She 100% was the type. And so I think it was like, because I was able to like find the other people in my community, like even in hindsight, some people who like I associate myself with or hung out with have later come out. Like one of my best friends growing up later came out, and like in a way where it was just kind of like, you didn't know that about me? Well, you never asked, you know, instead of it being like a big to-do. And I think that was a really blessed way to grow up. And then I went to school in Louisiana for college, and that was different. Because I had friends who, like my first friend that I made there, who I still kind of keep in touch with, told me that his parents put him in conversion therapy when he was growing up. And I was like, I didn't know that was still a thing. I thought that was from the 80s.
No,
you know?
I mean, yeah. And so I'm from Tennessee originally, and where I'm from is like I was brought up very Baptist, and so there was a lot of religion involved and a lot of religious trauma involved, and it was just a lot. I mean, my parents were very accepting of, well, I say that in hindsight now, I see it as tolerance, but at the time they said, you know, I just want you to be happy, but everybody else was like very shut down when it comes to being queer. And also there was no representation. I came out in, I don't know, 2012, I think. And it just, there was no representation at all.
The local paper was like, local child comes out as gay.
No, actually, it was like, what an abomination, you know?
Literally.
Oh my God.
But I think people forget that 2007 was when parents were still protesting interracial proms in some parts of the United States. Like people don't realize how short of a time we've had of progress, but then also this backlash that we're seeing, it's not out of nowhere.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's the kind of the conversation now around LGBTQ plus marriage as well, and same-sex marriage. And, you know, even my dad at one point was like, they'll never take it away. And I was like, you realize that it's only been 10 years that we've been, you know, have the opportunity to even explore same-sex marriage. And
adoption isn't rolled out across the United States. There's still discrimination for same-gender couples. And I think it's really dangerous because it's just dictating what family is valid, what form of love is valid. But those same people who are against two adults coming together and getting married are allowing child marriage to happen. And there's this amazing organization called Unchained at Last that works to, you know, ban child marriage in the United States. But it's so frustrating because you'll see the people who talk about like family values and stuff completely sell out their own constituents. And child marriage isn't happening to queer youth. It's usually happening, and it's not usually happening to youth of color. It's mostly happening to white evangelical Christian youth. And so it's like such hypocrisy. So I don't just mention it as like this gotcha, but as like a call to action, because there are literal ways we can protect young people, and hiding LGBTQ plus people, trans rights, gender affirming care is not like the solution. The solution is actually protecting children from the real predators. Yeah, absolutely. And more of that has to happen.
Most times when I have these conversations with family is, you know, they're coming from a place of protecting children. And I'm like, I understand that. And I think we can agree that we should all protect children. Yeah. But I do think that it comes from a place of projection in a lot of ways. Like they focus so much on LGBTQ plus, on drag queens, on whatever it might look like. But it's like you mentioned, you know, when you turn inward, and usually a lot of it comes from possibly the church sometimes, or soccer practices, or
any institution where you have somebody who is, even in the case of parents, saying this is the right way to live, don't question anything, and is suppressing a child from being able to make their own decision, you have the threat of violence and abuse. And I think that we have to talk about it in this more complex way. I did a video recently, or actually last year, with my friend El Duran about protecting the kids. And if we're going to actually protect the kids, we can't just say a blanket statement like all LGBTQ people are unsafe or all drag queens are unsafe. Because what that says is if you're not gay or, if you're cis and straight, then you are safe. And if you're not a drag queen, you are safe. Yep. And that's not healthy or helpful, because that means that you have predators who are in plain sight who are able to get away with abuse. Yeah. So I get quite on the soapbox about it. But fighting child marriage, actually protecting kids, making sure that we have bans on child labor, that we have education in schools. Yep. The same people who want to fight, gender inclusive sex ed are the people who want to get rid of sex ed in general. Yeah. But sex ed is some of the first places that young people learn about consent and how to protect themselves. And so it's really frustrating.
It goes back to the word hypocrisy, which you said in a lot of ways. And that's why I think that I admire your platform so much, because it's just constantly educating people. And I feel like, it is harsh to tell someone, like, hey, this hatred might be coming from a place of you not having access to the educational tools to be able to learn, to be able to open your mind, to be able to accept people. They don't take that well.
Yeah, hence, there's ways around it.
There's a way around it. But I do think that that's why it's so impactful to have people having platforms like you, because they're learning in places and ways that they might not have ever had access to before.
I hope so. Yeah. There was a video I did. So I had this huge influx of virality, I think last November and into December. And I was posting all this stuff. I was on vacation and I didn't have anybody. Usually I'm staying, I live with my husband, and usually he'll be like, okay, babe, maybe we don't film the skincare routine, but nobody was there. So I was like, we're filming everything. And so I was doing all these lists of Black women-owned businesses. And then I did a video on LGBTQ plus owned businesses. And some of the people who had followed me for the other content were like, ha ha ha, why is she supporting gay people? And I'm like, ha ha ha, I am bisexual.
Right.
And so I did a video talking about that. And I was like, so something that you should probably know about me if you want to continue following me, I'm bisexual. And I did a whole thing.
Had to do a breakdown.
And I was like, and if you felt a certain way about me before you knew that, that's a really exciting thing to unpack and work through.
Yeah,
because that's biphobia, and that's harmful. Yeah. Because you shouldn't be thinking differently of someone just because you learn a new thing about their identity that has already existed. And so many people in the comments were like, that was the most polite drag I've ever seen in my life.
It was the sweetest roast ever.
But it is, because it's look, you just learned a thing about you that might be problematic. Yeah. Well, but how exciting to unpack it.
I also feel, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on when it comes to representation, especially for the bisexual community, I still feel like there's so much progress that needs to happen. I do think that, the lesbian and gay communities are starting to be seen more and more on movies and books and music. But I do think that there is still bi-erasure. How do you navigate that? And what kind of representation do you wish that would happen more in media?
Well, I think I kind of had a little bit of a biphobic perspective on it myself, because I was like, okay, well, what's the worst thing that can happen if you're a bisexual woman who's married to a man? People don't think that you're bisexual when, I wasn't really thinking about how the complexity of your erasure is invalidating. I was like, well, it doesn't feel as big as me, as big to me as what's happening for our trans siblings. But I think that's a really, when we look at other people suffering and oppression, it doesn't invalidate suffering happening elsewhere. And sometimes it's very much connected, because it all comes down to dehumanization and invalidation of who somebody is, or only respecting someone if they fit into your box of who should be. So, in a way where somebody might be respected more if they're gender nonconforming, less if they're gender nonconforming than if they kind of adhere to the binary, or if somebody's in, a straight passing or straight appearing relationship, or if somebody's a lesbian couple and you can kind of see, representations of genders in a different way, So I think that it's a really important broad thing to look at in general. But then I started to look at the healthcare inequities, as well as the statistics around domestic violence and so many things where you have bisexual people who are falling through the cracks, because oftentimes we're not getting care and services from LGBTQ plus organizations because we're viewed to be outside of it. But then we're also not getting care from straight organizations. And so you have this huge contingent of, bisexual folks who are not getting the care that they need. And sometimes that comes down to looking at the MPX vaccine, who was able to have access to that because they were kind of looking just at men who have sex with men, not necessarily women who have sex with men Like, there's just so many different layers. And so I saw so much progress on this with the Biden administration. And so it's really frustrating that we're having this big anti-science administration right now.
So fun.
But there's awesome organizations like GLAMA, an amazing researcher named Jessica Hallam, who has helped me work through so much of that. And then I'm on the board of the Tegan and Sarah Foundation, and we created a directory called the LGBTQ plus Healthcare Directory, which is all about finding people in your local area who will be able to understand, like, hey, bisexuals exist, gay people exist, like maybe I need to approach sex and, contraception differently for a lesbian couple, or maybe I need to respect people's pronouns, just being able to have access to that healthcare resources. But I think also as after I got married, and I just started noticing, like, I was feeling disconnected from the community, and I was like, do people think that I'm straight now or something?
Yeah.
And so I literally made a video clearing it up.
I love that. You're like, I'm putting it back on the pedestal. Now we got to talk about these things. Right.
Because it was making me feel disconnected from myself.
Right.
And I think that people don't recognize, like, there's so many, I hear so much, like, homophobic adjacent things that are like, don't make it your whole personality, da-da-da-da-da. Well, there's a lot of people who make straight being their whole personality, and nobody talks to them, all right? They have podcasts, and it's called The Manosphere.
Oh my God, please don't give another man a podcast, please.
And it's like, I think that with bi erasure, a lot of it's internalized because you can, even if you have, I feel like I've had the most, like, affirming experience where I remember telling one relative that I was bisexual, and her response was like, oh, you're just greedy. And I immediately was like, that's a ridiculous thing to say, and, like, outdated and archaic and wrong. Next.
Right.
But I didn't internalize it. But what I did internalize is a lot of this, like, is what I'm going through as important or as this. And I think when we compare our sufferings, everyone loses, because you can end up dehumanizing yourself. And instead what we need to do is figure out how our suffering is connected and the way we can celebrate and how that's connected. But I think it's also a balance of, like, learning when to take up space and when not to, and when to, take a back seat. So it's an ongoing navigation, but I think that's the case for everybody. And I think I've had such a rich life being a bisexual person because I've had to do so much introspection.
Yeah.
And I think introspection's
right?
good.
I would imagine that is something that will be up and down as we continue to go through this current administration, the next one, and the next one, and like, I think our own community is constantly evolving. And in things, when I came out, I was so quick to put another label on myself. And now I'm like, wait a second. Now that I'm putting this new label on myself, what does that mean for me? And can I play outside of that box? And now I'm opening that box and seeing what happens if I try different things. And, so it's just interesting that how, yes, community building is great through labels and maybe icebreaker moments, but also not allowing yourself to get so confined in that box.
Who am I outside of this title? And, like, if I am queer and, like, also this or also that, is that allowed?
Yeah.
And I think it's just like, we can't use, so we are multifaceted and complex. And sometimes labels are tools to help us to get to understand who we are.
Yep.
But the label is not the identity.
Yep.
A label might be a way to describe parts of who we are, but you are someone outside of that. And I think, the problem, especially with the LGBTQ plus community, is that we have to be on offense so often that sometimes those richer, more nuanced, deeper conversations get missed because we're out here saying, I was born this way, I was born this way. At the same time, you have people who are changing maybe the label that they used to define themselves, and that's 100% valid as well. And so I think it can't be an all or nothing, because to be queer is to inherently be outside of these, like, Western scripts of all or nothing. Yeah. It's a lot of nuance. It's a lot of gray area. It's a lot of ambiguity. And I think our community is very comfortable with that internally, or at least we're getting there. But we have to kind of have this unified front externally. It's like the internal messaging versus the external messaging.
Well, it's also with, as we were talking about before, with this country in particular, is the American dream. We've all heard about the American dream. And when you really unpack what that is, it's actually the heteronormative version of what everyone should be looking like. White, cis, straight, 2 kids, dog, house, white picket fence. And so I think that that's also something the queer community is constantly breaking down what that means and kind of changing that, maybe being not a traditional quote unquote family. Maybe it's 2 gay dads, or maybe they have children through IVF, or whatever it might look like. But I think, challenging those gender norms, I think that's what I love so much about being queer, is just constantly saying, well, why is that the rule? Who made the rule in the first place,
Absolutely. And I think there's still growing pains within the community too. I remember one time I just started cracking up because it was like the 50th anniversary of Stonewall, and I'm like at this after party, and it was like so awesome. And there's this older gay gentleman there, and he was like, well, back in my day, it was just the lesbian and gay movement. And I was like, well, this is so exciting to explain how we wouldn't have the 50th anniversary of Stonewall if it weren't for Black, trans, and Latina, gender nonconforming and trans women who were challenging the standards, because it was for a lot of time, the gay liberation movement, it wasn't even a really liberation movement. It was like, we're just like you, except we're gay. It was kind of a gay assimilation movement. And you had people who were constantly dealing with suppression, constantly dealing with policing, lashing out against the systems that had oppressed them. And it moved the entire community forward. Mm-hmm. And when I said that, he was like, oh, yeah, I knew that. I was just kind of, yeah.
Yeah, you're like, sure, buddy.
I think that teaching people and getting them to admit they're wrong are two different battles, and I'm not interested in the latter. I just want people to learn. I don't need them to admit they were wrong. I just need them to act
I don't
better.
need them to admit, but they can go home and think about it.
Right? Mm-hmm.
Well, if someone was listening in right now, and maybe they're on their own self-discovery journey, and maybe they are starting to discover that they are bisexual, what is a piece of advice you would give them?
Ooh, so I love this little saying that I came up with, which is, you do know who you are. You've just been taught to doubt yourself. Because I think that there are so many things, like when you were a little kid and somebody was like, can you play the saxophone? You'd be like, yes. Yeah. Have you ever played the saxophone before? No. But you didn't know unless you tried that. And I think that there are so many forces in our world that try to convince us that we are nothing or that we shouldn't be around. And so as you're on this process of self-discovery, try to offload that sense of, oh, it's my fault that I don't know who I am. It's absolutely not. There are so many forces in this world that are getting you to try to conform. So remember that, and just know that the answers are already within you, and you might have tools that help you unlock those understandings, but nobody can help you figure out who you are except for yourself, because you are you.
Yeah.
I also believe you should be deeply, madly in love with yourself. But if you're not there yet, because a lot of people aren't, I hope you can at least respect yourself.
Yeah. Well, I think, constantly, and we'll talk more about, mental health in a moment, but we're constantly told that being selfish is a bad thing, that being selfish is a negative thing. You should always put other people to, and I do agree, you should be mindful about other people, but I feel like you can't truly pour love into others unless you actually do pour love into yourself first. And that's hard to do. It's truly hard to love yourself unconditionally. And I feel like we all go through these waves up and down. But with the LGBTQ plus community, what are better ways that we could show up better for each other, whether we are better allies for other people in our community, or maybe even supporting each other while we're out in public in heteronormative spaces? What are some ways that we could be better about solidarity?
That's a great question. I think of people kind of connecting the two ideas of self-care and community care, because that's really what it is, through people like Audre Lorde, who was a Black lesbian mother warrior poet. That was how she described herself, with periods in between. It's like Black period, mother period, But when she talks about self-care, which has been so taken away, she talks about how taking care of ourselves in a world that doesn't want you to exist is an act of revolution, and that in order for you to be able to show up for other people, you have to do that internal work. You have to take care of yourself, and that's really where the self-care came out of. We have to come to intersectionality theory. We have to start about that. So, with intersectionality theory, we have all these identities, and underneath those identities are the ways that we're impacted by different systems. Mm-hmm. And so you might see somebody who's being more impacted by a system than you are being impacted. Mm-hmm. And especially, I think, for people who have come out, you are experiencing a little bit of, I need to get back to the privilege I used to have.
Okay, yeah.
And because for somebody who isn't looking at intersectionality theory, who doesn't have this language, who may have just come out, everybody treated me a lot better before they knew I was, this. Everybody treated me a lot better before they knew that. And so for those folks, I try to have patience and understanding, but I also try to call those folks up to remember that they were always going to treat you that way, and it's just a matter of them having that information. So on the one hand, it's you can't really shade people for not coming out, because that's very difficult. But on the other hand, it makes it a lot more worthwhile for you to fight alongside the people who are going through the most, because a rising tide raises all ships. Yeah. And so I think that's how we have to think about our solidarity, is that, well, if everyone just was in a relationship and we got rid of, polyamory, then we'd all be respected. Absolutely not, because they all think of us in the same way. And even if they don't, we don't lose anything by lifting up the people.
Absolutely.
And if we do lift up those people, then everyone gets validated. If we have the blanket idea of non-traditional families are valid, that does include people who are genderqueer. That does include, two moms. It does include two dads. It does include single moms. It does include trans moms. It includes everybody. And instead of just saying, okay, well, I hear you, nuclear family is right, but can we also have gay people? Yeah. It doesn't make sense because you're fighting for crumbs. Yeah. And I think that as a community, we have to stop trying to fight for crumbs. We have to stop accusing or blaming other people for bringing oppression upon us unless they are the dominant powers. Yeah. Because these dominant powers, they will use us against each other. We've seen that happen. But if we refuse that, then they can't. Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned something before that it was something that I had to go back and learn new language for myself as well, and about being straight passing. I used to say, when we traveled, I had the privilege of being able to be straight passing if I needed to be able to be more safe. And I spoke with someone, even in our community, who's actually brought it to my attention that saying straight passing means that straight is the goal, and that straight is actually inherently and subconsciously making you feel like you'll never be enough because you're not straight passing enough. And for other people who might not be straight passing, right? They don't even have the opportunity of being straight passing, which means they're never going to be successful in that. And I was like, wow, that was an interesting thought. I never thought about it that way, that comparing myself to being straight passing means that straight is the goal, the ultimate goal. And I was like, oh, so I'm basically just oppressing myself through my own language, right? So they said straight assuming would be better because people will just assume that you're straight. And I would love to hear if that's something you agree. Or I was like, I think that's so important because I think the other thing that might happen when we talk about who's passing and who isn't and all that language is that's why I love my air quotes. Yeah. So those who are listening, I'm doing a lot of heavy air quoting. I try to do it with my voice inflection, but the finger quotes, if you watch Smarter in Seconds with that info, you're like, she does use little finger quotes a lot. But I think it's important because it also says that oh, I'm safe. I'm marked safe from this disaster on Facebook, you know? And it's not real. I think it's also really fake. And I really try to talk to a lot of cisgender women about this because a lot of folks are thinking, oh, well, these attacks that are happening in the United States or in the UK when it comes to trans folks don't really apply to me, but it 100% does because it's all about dictating whose performance of gender is correct. And you don't have to be trans for your performance of gender to be attacked. Yeah. Black women have experienced that. If you look at poor women have experienced that. There's just so many different people who've experienced, even the fact that a recent thing is women wearing pants. Yeah. I'm like, they better not be taking my pants away from me. But I'm saying, there's, if we have all these rules about who's a woman and how they're a woman and all these different things, and so much of it is being connected to reproduction, and then reproduction's being, controlled and policed. And so it really benefits everyone. And I think it's frustrating because there's a lot of education practitioners in the world who are well, you shouldn't have to tell people that they benefit from it. People are selfish, in my opinion. I think that people, as much as we should be, because altruism is very good, it has health benefits, has mental health benefits, but people need to know what's in it for me. And I'm who's in it for you? Right. Just learning about other people. It's good for your mental health. It is. At the end of the day, when we fight, if you're cis and you fight for trans folks, that's going to benefit you. And whether that's you feeling good about yourself because you're oh, I just did a good thing. Yeah. Or it's you literally having your rights protected because you've protected the rights of somebody who you think is so outside of who you are. But everything is connected because all of our humanity is connected. Yep. And if we fight dehumanization, then everyone benefits, even the oppressors. I'd love to talk about religion and spirituality. You practice Islam. I would love to learn about that. And you converted at one point, right? So what was that journey like for you? So yes, I'm Muslim. I converted to Islam 10 years ago. And that just feels so bananas because, with my parents being so accepting of me being queer and, obviously accepting of me being Black because they're also Black. I think Islam was the thing that was the most difficult for them to accept because it was so, I think to them, not so much my dad, but definitely my mom, felt so outside of how she was raised. And then also, they, existed in the United States with all of this Islamophobic rhetoric, particularly after 9/11. So when they saw that I was converting to Islam, I think my dad was just oh, she's a free spirit. My mom was I need to go down there and see if she's okay. She real turned into Liam Neeson real quick. So my mom actually came to visit me the week I converted to Islam because she just wanted to make sure everything was okay, which I appreciate. Little temperature check, 100%. Okay. Is she in a cult? Is she all right? And I think that for me, what drew me to Islam was there was just such an emphasis on service. And I had to kind of explain to my mom and try to help her understand that service was such a big part of our Christianity growing up because I was raised Christian. And I remember there was like this scandal with a church that we used to go to where there was like an embezzling scam, and the preacher got removed and like the church shut down for a time. It was a mess. And my dad was somebody who was donating a lot. And I feel like I had to be like 6 or 7, really a lot of formative stuff happened when I was
around 7, 8.
Yeah. And my parents were just like, they sat us all down and they were like, hey, so instead of going to church today, we're going to go volunteer and we're going to do this. So we're going to start doing that more often, and we're going to start taking care of the people in our lives, because clearly that money wasn't going anywhere except for to the pastor. And that was really formative to me. I was like, oh, okay, 1, you don't have to do all of your good works inside of a religious institution. 2, you're allowed to call out things that happen within your community, your religious community, that are problematic. And that just because somebody is a pastor or a priest doesn't mean they're closer to God or that they're infallible. And I feel like those are really important lessons. And so I had always been kind of spiritual. I think I had like flirted with the idea of like just more spiritual practices, but I really love the aspects of kind of more institutionalized religion where you have like a place to go to, you have a place to pray.
Right.
And I don't think that's exclusive to religious spaces, but it's something I really like.
Yeah.
And even today, I still really love gospel music. That's just such a part of like my culture and my background and my family. So I'll still go with my aunts and uncles to, the Christian service because I love to hear the music.
Yeah.
But for me, Islam was just the way that I could transform my relationship with God and kind of take away all of the like pomp and circumstance. So even today, with me being a 10-year Muslim now, I don't really post about Islam a lot. Like, you'll not really see me. I think I did right at the beginning. Like, I don't really post like, this is me on my prayer mat, this is me fasting for Ramadan. And of course, no shade to anybody who does that, but I think for me, it's just like, I need my religious experience to be so separate and outside of monetization and content because of my religious upbringing, which was so, what are you wearing to church? Are you wearing stockings? Are you wearing the right color pantyhose? Are you wearing white before or after Labor Day?
It almost removes the you aspect of it, like why you're truly going there from a deeper space, right? Versus a surface level almost, or whatever it might be showing up online. I assume.
And I think what I had to learn over these 10 years is that exists everywhere. You have that in Islam, you have that within Judaism, you have that within Christianity.
Right.
And it's just, sometimes, and I don't think it's for me to judge either, because I think that for some people it really works well for them to post like every single aspect of their prayer routine, or sometimes I'll even get served ads as, with Easter just being recently, like all the movies we're watching for Holy Week, and I love that for folks, but for me, I needed a religious environment that was very personal. And so when I was converting, and my peers in school, because the great thing about like the Louisiana, like kind of Baton Rouge Islamic community, was that there's so many folks who are in academics, and so they were like very much like in the scholarship of Islam. It's like, why don't you read this? Why don't you read this book and read the Quran, the Quran in these different transliterations from Arabic, and if you have any questions, I'll let you know, but I'm not here to tell you what the answer is. And that was like so for me. And so I don't know. I feel like Islam has been a great choice for me. It helped me slow down and center myself. And I remember when I like first became kind of like this viral Muslim on the internet, people were like, tell me why my religion's wrong. And I'm like, dude, I'm not going to do that. Like, if Islam was right for everybody would be Muslim. But it's not. So people are other things. And religion isn't right for everybody. And so I'm very much like live and let live.
Yeah. Well, it's also a personal experience. It's a personal relationship to the higher power that we have. And I think that's why I love talking about that so much on this show, because to me, I see it as almost different languages to how we speak to a higher power. And like, I still think ultimately we all have the end goal to give love and be loved and have this full life that we have here. And then hopefully, whatever comes next, it's like still full of love and
absolutely. And if that involves
a
god or a deity or gods, beautiful. If it doesn't, beautiful. My thing is like, be a good human and be good to other humans.
Absolutely.
And if there are stories or wisdoms that you love from ancient traditions, involve that in your life. But if you don't.
Absolutely. And when I want to talk about a little bit of the misconceptions as well, because sometimes in today's world, there's a lot of misconceptions around what it means to be Muslim. And I would love to hear, how you still celebrate queerness and being a woman. And sometimes it's seen as maybe an oppressive tool, but it's not. And I would love to see where you find your celebrations and your joy through your faith.
Well, I think anytime you get any institution and you mix it up with patriarchy, you get bad news bears. Yeah. And that happens in Islam, that happens in Christianity.
Yeah, every religion.
And especially when there was the movement around Iran and, you know, fighting the patriarchal oppression there, I was really keen to be vocal about how there are cases where, you know, Islam is used as a tool of patriarchy. We see that really badly right now in Afghanistan. I think so many people are focused, rightly so, on Gaza. We also have to look at people who are in Afghanistan. Like, women are being banned from being outdoors. Their voices are being banned.
Yeah.
Women within, like, you know, communities in Afghanistan can't even speak too loudly unless their voice is heard outside.
And this is also, to your point before, that these aren't, this hasn't been a forever thing. This is also very frequent.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, very recent in history, like within the last 20, 30 years, right?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, what's happening with the Taliban in Afghanistan, it's like even within the past 20 years. And with the recent laws following the collapse of the Afghan government, it's, you know, getting into the past, 3 to 5 years. Yeah. And there's an amazing woman who I have the joy of being friends with named Zara Wakilzada, who can, you know, she's from Afghanistan. She does a lot of advocacy, and she's actually committed herself to, you know, diplomacy because she's seen how like these different government policies have changed her life. And so she wants to help, you know, women have more freedom. And then there's also incredible women like Malala. But I think that the misconceptions with Islam is that you look at situations like what's happening in Afghanistan or in Iran, and people think, oh, that's all of Islam.
Right.
But that would be like looking at what's happening in Atlanta with the abortion bans, where people have died in parking lots because they haven't been able to get the abortion care that they need, and saying that's all of America. Or looking at, you know, some of the horrific sects of, you know, like kind of very loosely affiliated Christianities and saying that that is the same thing as all Christianity.
Yep.
And so I invite people to come to any understanding of any community with an open heart and an open mind, because there's a vested interest in dehumanizing people and to say these people are un-American, these people are da-da-da. And I think that within the LGBTQ plus community, what I've experienced, especially like right after I came out as bisexual, kind of, you know, people knew me as Muslim a lot of times before they knew me as bisexual. And I think a part of that had to do with my own biphobia of being like, okay, well, I'm in a relationship with who's my now husband. I don't really need to, you know, be part of this community. And I was like, okay, and I'm doing the Muslim thing. Like, there's just like a lot of identities going on.
Yeah.
And so,
but as you said before, it's a nuance, right?
Yeah.
So much intersectionality.
But after I came out, there were a lot of people who were like, so what are you doing to combat homophobia within Islam? And I was like, what are we doing to combat Islamophobia within the queer community? And I think there's a lot of people who have very real religious trauma, whether it is from a Christian standpoint, a Jewish standpoint, Hindu, Buddhist, Muslim, etc. And that has to be accounted for. But I also do not like to surrender God to the homophobes. That's a huge thing. Yeah. Because, like, why would I let a homophobe dictate? Like, the story that is usually used in Islam is the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, or the story of Prophet Lot, which is, you know, Lot's wife, and which I think, on a clear reading from many different transliterations, is a story against incest and the abuse of children, which we know are bad things.
Yes.
But it's used as a condemnation on any form of queerness, on loving consensual relationships between adults, which feels like a misread. And so I stand on business about that. And I've gotten condemned. I actually got condemned by a pretty huge imam who was like in this massive mosque surrounded by dudes, talking about how evil I am. And this other guy, I don't even want to name drop him, but he was like, show me why you were supporting Blair Imani before and then stop supporting her after she came out. And then he was like, because I think a lot of people saw me with my, you know, my partner, and were like, well, she's with the guy. What do you mean? She's with a guy. Well, when she came out, and because the nuance doesn't exist, they're like, so she's a lesbian now, so I don't support her. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of validating that you're standing on business about being homophobic. Because so many people who are homophobic will be like, no, I think you're going to hell. Yeah. But I wouldn't say that to your face. This person was like, no, she's going to hell. I don't support her. Yeah. And when I saw that clip, and the funny thing was, I was at the White House Eid, not this past year, but the year before. So maybe it was 2022? I can't remember. But, and I saw somebody there who I think we're like, you know, colleagues or whatever. And she's like, I just watched a video about you. And I was like, no, I watched a video of yours and I watched a video about you are two different things.
Yes.
Love to hear the first, don't like to hear the second one.
Right.
So I watched a video about you. I was like, what? Now, a more curious me would have Googled it immediately at that party and then had a panic attack at that party.
Yes.
But I've grown. Okay. And so I was like, I will, if it happens if I see it, great. If not, whatever. So then another day I spiraled and had caffeine and happened to look it up. And I saw this video. But the thing that cracked me up was that they were so rowdy in the mosque, they got kicked out of the mosque and took the conversation to the street.
No.
And like literally these two dudes that I've never met before are arguing about me in a place that I've never been, surrounded by guys that I'll never meet. And it was just like,
why
what?
are you so worked up? Why am I affecting you?
But the
this
gag
much?
is, like, if you denounce me and my parents don't care, you weren't effective. Because my parents were like, did Oprah denounce you? Because if not, whatever.
Yeah, because that would be a different story. I feel like that would be
I would not
definitely
be able to come
deserving of a panic attack.
But I took it in stride and I used it to raise money for this organization called Muslims for Progressive Values. And Ani Zaneveld, who's the president and founder of that organization, I credited her at one point for being the reason I'm still Muslim, because her whole mindset is, you can be you and be Muslim at the same time. And sometimes having somebody who has religious scholarship behind them to be able to tell you that, like, you can do as much research as you want, but sometimes you need somebody to be able to say, hey, no, you deserve to exist and you can be Muslim and queer. And I think the biggest transformation with me hasn't really been around my queerness in Islam. I think it's been around my head covering in Islam, because, if you look back at pictures of me, I was definitely covered up more conservatively than I am now. But I think I'm way more comfortable now. And I think being a covering Muslim woman, like the way that I feel like we feel compelled to talk about it online is that, like, not every day do I want to wear a hijab, but I think that's part of like the, for me, the call to respecting God. And it's not for me to say that like a Muslim woman who doesn't wear a hijab is less, because that's also not allowed in the Quran, first of all. Judgment's not allowed. But it's also, I think, a shirking of your own responsibility and your own path. So for me, I think it helps me keep God in mind. But I have to do it in a way that makes sense for me.
Sure. Absolutely.
And I think being able to stand on business about that has been really healthy, because I was for a while, I think, living, especially after I came out, I was like, okay, well, if I still wear hijab perfectly and I still cover myself perfectly, then maybe I'll get that privilege back that I lost before.
So it's also like finding that balance of how to find a little validation, but also self-validation, but versus finding it from other people. Because
100%.
Being a public figure, I'm sure you get, someone has something to say about everything.
Literally.
And I think that with self-discovery, whether that is religion or whether it is cultural upbringings or changing, mindsets, it's your journey. It's no one else's, whether they like to think so or not. Because
it gets parasocial out here. Like, I remember I maybe showed a little bit more hair than usual, and somebody, like, you could tell they were really like disappointed and feeling lost. And I was like, baby, it's my head, not yours.
Right.
You can still wear it or not.
So what would be your absolute favorite thing I know there's a million things, but what would be one of your favorite things about being Muslim?
Ooh. So just this past Eid, I was hanging out with my friend Faizan and all of his friends and some of his family members, and we had like done henna, and we all just kind of came together and prayed, and right before we break our fast, and that unifying experience, because so we pray 5 times a day ideally. I'm a human being who makes mistakes, so I'm gonna get probably a good 1 or 2 per day. But during Ramadan I try to be on it. Like Ramadan is like our kind of Lent, where you have to, you try to be on your best behavior. And so during Ramadan, I definitely didn't make every single prayer. I definitely didn't make every single fast, but that's okay. Allah's still working on me. Yep. But I think praying is so beautiful because we pray at the same time. So everyone who, like you might see it in a place where, like in the United States, you might see it more in New York or in places like Chicago where there's more Muslims, or in Minneapolis where you see kind of people come together and pray, and we're all supposed to be facing Mecca. And I think that's a really beautiful unifying experience because you don't have to be in a mosque to feel in community. And I think that's the most beautiful part. And I think outside of the practice of Islam, or not necessarily outside of it, but I think another aspect I really enjoy is the emphasis on public works, because when my parents had that shift from being inside the church to being kind of doing church in action, that's really resonated with me within Islam. I love it.
And that kind of leads me to my next section of questions is your love for activism and your love for teaching and educating. It's such a specific way of doing it because I think you give the other person the opportunity to be interested and to not feel attacked and to lead with curiosity versus everything else. Because I think a lot of times now we fear what we don't know, but a lot of times we've gotten so polarized where we don't even know where to find information because there's so much disinformation out there that it's kind of hard to find good, solid educators who are telling you from a genuine standpoint. So hands down to you. Absolutely. Absolutely. So where did your love of activism and education come from?
So 100% from my parents. My dad was the type of dad who was like, still is. My dad's the type of dad where if you ask him a question, he will respond in a riddle. Or he'll I've changed the gate code to be the year of this. And you'll be like, okay.
Just let me in.
Yeah, literally. And you're like, okay. So sometimes he would do that and I don't know, I think he's forgotten how to reprogram the gate. Thank God. But when I was a kid, we would he'd be taking us to school and be like, okay, well, today's gate code is the year of whatever. Okay. The year this happened. We didn't have Google yet. So we'd have to go to the encyclopedia and be like, what is the gate code? And then, to get back in the house. But I think that was fun because he made it like a scavenger hunt. And we were just watching some home videos and there was this Easter home video and he has us all sitting down who my dad loved. My dad was the OG influencer. He had all of the vlogs from every family moment. And so it was for Easter. And he was like, does anyone know what Easter is about? And we're all like, oh, yeah. And that was just part of life. It was I remember there being trivia at the dinner table. I remember there being trivia before bedtime. I remember there being we're waiting in traffic, trivia time. And so that's a huge part of it. And then the activism as well. My dad was involved in a lot of student organizations when he was growing up. And there was one thing where he was the commencement speaker at Claremont McKenna, or not commencement speaker, but what's it called when you speak in front of your class?
Terrifying.
I'm dead. It's valedictorian. I don't remember.
Valedictorian.
He was hired, or not hired, but he was asked to speak. I don't remember what year he graduated, but he's in his 70s, and he wrote a speech. And it was, you have to really think about this. He's a young Black man who is having to fight for his right to, be at school and do all the same things that white students are being able to do. And then also it's on the heels of Dr. King being murdered. And just, that was a really formative part of his life because I think he was 18 when that happened. So he's speaking and he turns in one speech. Mind you, back then you had to type out your speech. Okay. He writes 2 speeches. He writes one that's super, ho-hum, peace and love, do my best, students. And another one that was a call to revolutionary action for the graduates of Claremont McKenna. Okay. And that's the one he delivered, but he turned in a different one to the administrators. So you have these older white guys behind him, literally white knuckling in these black and white photos, so stressed out in the face, looking at my dad give this powerful speech. But that's the type of person my dad is. My dad will be they'll be like, well, don't get him too riled up. And he'll be like, I won't. Surprise!
Yeah, and,
I think that's just been, or for example, he had the opportunity to go to South Africa during apartheid, and what they would do, because, during apartheid, it was racially segregated.
Which, again, was recent history.
Very recent,
absolutely.
And people like Elon Musk grew up during that time, which explains everything. And
another hour for that one.
Yes, indeed. But I think that, so he had the opportunity to go, and he would have had protection from the U.S. consulate and all that. But he was like, I'm not going to participate, and I'm not going to be complicit in my people suffering, even if it's, seemingly a world away. And that's just very much the vibe that he's had. And then my mom, being a social worker, she's very much all about standing up for people, whether it's my little sister and making sure she had the disability accommodations that she needed, or making sure that we were treated properly. And I think that when you have parents like that, you might not realize it at the time. I just thought my parents were really dramatic.
Okay.
But in hindsight, I'm 100% who I am because of them.
Wow. I love that. And so when did you start your social media platform? Because were you always an activist when you first started, or did it kind of spin into that as life does?
I'll tell you the first kind of activist thing I did, which was we had just learned about girls in Mali and how they're, a lot of them couldn't go to school. And I remember we read it in National Geographic. It's girls in Mali can't go to school even though school costs $7 a year or something. And I was like, we're doing a bake sale. And my teacher was like, that is not what the assignment was. And I was like, too bad, we're doing a bake sale. So I literally went to the principal, got all the permits, and we had a huge bake sale, and we sent something like 200 girls to school in Mali at this one school. Wow. And I was so proud of myself. But it was this is what you should be doing. Yeah. And I was, again, probably 8 years old.
7 or 8. Wow, that was a transformative year.
It was the time. But
you're like, that was my era.
It was my era. And I mean, I was also being inundated with Barbie telling me I could literally do anything, and American Girl dolls showing me how to fight the Great Depression. I was like, we can do anything.
Yes, I love it.
So it was definitely girl power era, and I definitely internalized that. But as far as, my activism, I actually got arrested at a protest back in 2016 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And I think I spent a little bit of, it was just so stressful and so unfortunate because I had gone to school in Louisiana, and I felt like for a long time I couldn't go back home. Like I couldn't go back to the alumni events. I felt like I couldn't go back to, sporting events because there was just this stigma, because there was so much misinformation about how that protest went down, and a lot of people were blaming the protesters for the unrest. And so after we sued the city of Baton Rouge and we won, a lot of that cleared up, which was so great. Good. And so I think my husband and I probably next year will be going to some of the football games. So it'll be good.
Okay, good.
That's why I went to that school. So we could go to football games and have the alumni connections. And now I feel like I can't show my face, but now I do. And I think that's kind of how my social media presence started, because I got arrested pretty publicly to the point where the pictures and videos of me were just kind of broadcast everywhere. And there was this time, I think in the 2010s through the 2020s, where people are different viral moments, but don't necessarily have their own story.
Yes.
And so I constantly felt like I had to fight against that. And so I started writing books. I kind of became like a commentator on the news, which is how I ended up coming out on accident on Tucker Carlson, which is on YouTube. But I think that when my social media platform started, it was so great because it wasn't based on other people's viral moments of me. It was on me creating my own stuff, my own work, and being a content creator.
Almost like a reclamation, where you were like, this is my story and it's going to come from me.
Exactly.
While other people try to tell your story for you, you're like, no, this is through my lens. And,
or even more than that, just being like, hey, it's not about me right now, it's about the education.
Yeah.
And me being able to like give to the world in a way that I felt like, because I wanted to be a lawyer and I had taken a year off of law school. I was like, my plan was like work at Planned Parenthood for a year and then go back and work at law school, or, then go back to law school. And then I got arrested super publicly and I was like, well, that's out the window.
But isn't that crazy how that was almost a pivotal moment, if not the pivotal moment, that really just slingshot you into the direction that you're going now. And before you mentioned misinformation and disinformation, right now I feel like that is something that we're constantly battling in the U.S., especially because I think for me, growing up, I didn't even have a phone yet, and so now even children have access to the internet and access to phones. And so while one way social media is fantastic to be able to observe and have access to people all around the world, it's also sometimes the algorithm can keep you in certain loops, and it's a really hard way to get out of it, and then that becomes everything you learn. I would love to learn, how do you fight misinformation, disinformation, and especially if people are looking to get more into an activist standpoint, where can they look?
I think an example that we can all learn from is recent horrific statements that were said by RFK about autism. And I saw some people who were trying to find something redeemable in that. So people were saying things like, well, sometimes autism can be very difficult. Can I cuss on here?
Yeah, go ahead.
Shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Like, what are we saying? Why?
Yeah.
Because yes, that is true, but that's not what RFK was saying.
Yeah.
RFK wasn't saying, let's have a nuanced conversation about the support needs of different autistic people and how they might burden their parents or support systems. No, he was saying some eugenicist bullshit about how autistic people shouldn't exist, about how they don't contribute to society. And that language coming from somebody who's in part of such a fascist administration is a red flag for dehumanization, for eugenics, etc.
Yep.
So I saw people and I was like, y'all, you do not have to find a grain of truth when a bigoted person says a diatribe of horrific stuff. You don't have to go, oh, well, this one was not. No.
You don't have to take 100% of what they say and say 1% might be correct.
No,
and then
you can say,
the rest
actually,
of the 99%.
based on us rounding up, we're going to throw that the fuck away. And then we will maybe have a conversation about this. But I was so disappointed in people because I'm like, no, this is red flags. And so I think that's a big fight when it comes to disinformation and misinformation is like, call it what it is.
Yeah.
When you see something and it gives you the ick or cringe or it's coming from nowhere or it's not cited, reject that. Stay skeptical. I think that I get a little bit, not a little bit. I said a little bit and then a lot at the same time. So I get a lot of this from my mom who's very much like, trust no one, trust nothing, trust yourself only. And I feel that way with social media because even when I make claims like about different, if I'll do Smarter in Seconds on something health related, I'm working with a doctor or I'm working with resources and I have that stuff cited and directed because you shouldn't trust me. Like, yes, I feel like I have a value system, but don't just trust me because I'm Blair, trust me because of the work that I put out.
Yeah.
Misinformation and disinformation can be so harmful because we see people in positions of power saying harmful things and we can go, well, surely they're not out to get us. Baby, just look at history. There's been a lot of people they've been out to get and it's been, very recent as well.
Yeah.
So I think that was a good example. So how can we, in a situation like that, start sharing stories that are true? Instead, and what I did was talked about how my dad is autistic, my husband's autistic, my sister's autistic, my creative director is autistic, and they make my life more rich. And that when we see people like RFK saying harmful things like autism autism tears families apart, it's not because he's trying to have a nuanced conversation about autism. It's because he's trying to dehumanize autistic people and giving people historical context for that. When has this happened before? Every fascist regime. And so trying to not fall for things, even with things you believe in and even with things you agree with, because sometimes that can be BS too.
I feel like that goes back to what we had talked about before with generalizing, right? Like generalizing all religions based on one experience, or generalizing all populations based on one experience. And it's the same what goes for this, generalizing all communities based on one person's opinion on it. Like just because this guy who honestly has no backing and whatever, that's a whole different subject. But listening to him dehumanize people and then generalizing that for all autistic people is just like, I don't understand where the critical thinking is on that, but agreed.
There's a healthy thing that people do, which is like, oh, I don't have enough information to have an opinion. You do have enough information to call out bullshit.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's okay to say things like, whoa, that's a ridiculous thing to say around me. Or, just stuff like that where you're just like kind of setting light boundaries. Like, that's not a conversation I want to be having, just to start to shut shit down. But then also, if you see it on social media and you see something that's full of shit, go on that little 3 dots or shake the phone. Sometimes you can do too, and report it.
Yeah.
Yes. And
absolutely.
say not interested. Yeah. I do that all the time. Sometimes I'll just block people. Like I'll see people say ridiculous stuff about like, you don't have to cook your chicken all the way. And I'm like, blocked.
Oh my God. This has got to go.
Not the salmonella squad.
I'm dying. Whenever it comes to being public in social media or just existing as a human, I'm assuming you receive backlash, you receive messages just through showing up as yourself, right? How do you combat criticism online, and how do you take care of your peace with that?
So, and there's an amazing woman out of the UK, awesome advocate and model, Monroe Bergdorf. And I saw her speak at the Teen Vogue Summit years ago. I don't even know if they still do the Teen Vogue Summit. Back when I was Teen Vogue age. And
7.
No. It was definitely like, I don't know, 6 or 8 years ago. And I asked her the same question, and she's like, block and delete it, babes. Yeah. Block and delete it, with her perfect British accent. And I thought it was so helpful, but I didn't really know how to do that, because I think there's this kind of aspect of self-harm that can come from social media, which is when you like start obsessively Googling yourself, or you start looking at the comment section when you know you shouldn't. And it's tough because it's obviously there and you have the right to know. But if that information is going to be harmful to you and you have a suspicion for that, you need to start creating systems. Yeah. So I have like my general inbox, and one thing I do is that on my online form, so this is like really inside information. On my online form, you can select like why you're reaching out, question, inquiry, I have concern, which I will understand, because concern might be like, Blair, you miscited something, right? Okay, but if it's hate, because sometimes people will literally select the hate one, it goes straight to spam, because I don't need to see that. If you're sending me hate, that's a you problem.
Select that.
It's ridiculous.
The audacity.
But then we created a filter, so if it's marked as hate, it goes straight to the bin.
Wow.
I have a support system, so I have my awesome, creative manager, Kat Wheeler, who helps to like manage like new incoming connections and just having people who have your back. I spend some time offline. Sometimes I'll like enjoy my day offline with my family. And then I'll log back on and I'll be like, oh, that was the drama of the day. And I actually feel really bad for people, whether they're the subject of the drama or like the drama's coming at them, or they're like, but it's just like, that's not a fulfilling way to live. And I'm not saying that your online friendships don't count or that your online interactions don't count. What I'm saying is it can't be everything. Yeah. At least that's been true for me. And I have to have something that's outside of that. The other thing I do is, people say don't take it personal all you want. I just create barriers. So like I have my list of banned words that don't appear on my page. I have my like, for a long time, the entire time I was going viral, I only had it so you could comment if you followed me.
Okay.
And people were like, that's such a diva move. I don't care, baby. This diva's mentally healthy.
I love that. Well, if someone's listening and maybe they're struggling with mental health right now, or maybe just feeling low energy, what is a self-practice that you do to bring yourself back to yourself again?
Sleep and eat. There are so many times throughout the day where I feel like the world is ending, and it's just because I needed my blood sugars low. And I just did a post about that, and people were cracking up. And I was like, I waited too long to eat, and now I'm miserable. A memoir. And people were like, wow, I'm on my 7th edition of that memoir right now.
It's crazy is like this year I've been eating healthier. I've been sleeping more. I've been working out, and I feel good. And I'm like, damn it, now I got to keep
going. It works,
going.
Right? I hate the pace. So my back pain, I do CrossFit, and I feel like it's such a surprising thing when people learn that about me, because I'm like, they're like, you're not even butch. I'm like, when my back pain is worse when I'm not working out, my energy level is worse, and my brain fog is worse. And I'm like, gosh darn, that means that it really does work.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And I'm not saying that you have to do Olympic levels of movement.
Yeah.
Kick your legs. Like, one thing that I was doing, and this might be a little bit advanced for folks, but like as I'm waiting for whatever app, whether it's like Edits or CapCut, to render my video, I'm doing a little plank.
Oh,
and it's just like a little
plank.
Yeah, just a little plank in there.
My stomach will start hurting, but
don't do that.
Good.
But do something else. Like just picture
like one sit up.
No. You know, like a hollow hold or whatever you can do just to get moving. Even if it's one of those little hot girl walks that everybody likes, or just like figuring out a way to get in touch with your body. And I think that self-touch is a really important part of that. And whenever I say that, people go to an erotic space. That's fine too. But like whether you're bathing yourself or putting lotion on, or like when you're doing your skincare routine, like tapping your face.
I like to give myself a hug sometimes.
Giving yourself a hug. There's so many ways. So actually, I started a podcast with my friend Michael Threets. It's called Thoughts About Feelings. And every episode is brought to us by an act of self-care. And one of the episodes is brought to you by a big hug.
Oh, see?
Because there's little things that we can do to take care of ourselves that cost $0. Yeah. And I think a lot of folks are taught that if you do those things and you're deviant, you're problematic, just like going to the example with self-touch. As soon as I say self-touch is important, people are like, you're telling people to masturbate. And I'm like, I'm not telling them not to.
I don't know why people eroticize everything. I'm like,
they really
relax.
do.
Get your mind out the gutter.
I think you're the one that has sex on the brain, okay? But I think even when we talk about things like positive self-talk, people are like, oh, if you're talking to yourself, that's a sign of mental illness. And it's like, it's also a mental health tool.
Yeah,
like, we don't have to pathologize everything. Yeah. We don't have to demonize everything or eroticize everything. And I think that's really important. But there's also like, I think that sometimes folks think that if you have mental health needs, like unless you are making a plan to no longer exist, then you don't really need those services. And I don't think that's true at all. Mm-hmm. I have been in that place before where I've had to check myself into mental health care. But there's like just resources, like one that I love so much is loveyourmindtoday.org, which is from the Ad Council and the Huntsman Mental Health group. And it just has things for like worry. Like, do you have persistent worry? Are you dealing with grief? Like just as an idea. They have these little, like, if you like Smarter in Seconds, you'll love it because it's just like you click on the tab and it'll just be like tools for worry. Okay. And it'll just help you, like, for me, it's helped me. I can tend to spiral. Okay. I think, as I've mentioned. Same. And it's just like you get one thought and you just keep.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like if you type in, why am I worried on Google, it'll be like, you're dying. And you're like, oh my God.
Because they don't have like the nuanced algorithms because they're just like, hey, don't do anything to yourself on our watch, which is their, prerogative as a giant company. But I think that there's so many ways we can get support, and we try to share those in every episode of Thoughts About Feelings because it's like a lot of people are struggling, and sometimes what we just ask people to do is just find a thing to look forward to for one more day. Yeah. Or get involved in an activity because we are isolated, but there's ways to fight that, and you deserve it. Yeah.
You have a really amazing series, Smarter in Seconds. I'd love to hear how that started and why that is so impactful for you.
So it started because I remember Instagram Reels was coming out. And do you remember Vine?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I missed the Vine boat.
I missed it, but I know about it.
Right?
I heard I would have loved the humor.
I feel like I never even downloaded the app. I was just like, I don't know if I was like in my working girl corporate era or what, probably. But I think that like when Vine came out was when I first got my job. But anyway, so I missed Vine completely. And I was like, not again. This app is coming out. I missed TikTok when it was like Musical.ly to TikTok. No, I'm going to get in there. But I was like, what am I going to do? Because everybody else was talking about like at the agency that I'm with, they were like, okay, well, I'm going to do dancing. I'm going to do, fits. I'm going to do lip singing. And I was like, I can't do any of that. And not that I couldn't do any of that. I felt like it wasn't like, I'm not that girl, It's not my ministry. And so I remember one of the pieces of advice we got from Raina Pachansky, who's the head of DBA, and she was like, well, just figure out what you do and then just figure out how to do that on video. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, it was like a revelation. I was like, oh my gosh, well, I talk a lot, so I'll just talk a lot on video. And my friend Color Me Courtney, who's an amazing content creator, new mom, she was like, if you need any support, let me know. And so I reached out to her and I was like, can you help me come up with a title? Because Smarter in Seconds is actually going to be called quarter-minute lessons, because at that time it was just 15 minutes. And she was like, girl, do not make people do math in the title of anything.
It also gets close to like quarter-life crisis, and you're like,
it's just not it. And so she has a marketing, I'm pretty sure she has a master's degree in marketing, and it shows. Okay. And she deserves a PhD in marketing. And she came up with the idea for Smarter in Seconds, or the name for it, and it matched up with the idea I had. And Lord knows how many episodes since, but we've had, I think 100 million views or something crazy.
Oh my God.
And it's just, I think what's been so impactful for me is that I loved show and tell as a kid. I loved trivia as a kid. And now I get to learn about things like, you know, I didn't realize until I had done the research, and Kat Wheeler helped me with the research for the video, was that only 15% of blind people actually see nothing, complete darkness. Most blind folks actually perceive some sort of light. And that helps to debunk, you know, myths. Like sometimes there would be negative conspiracy theories about people like Stevie Wonder, people who are blind in public who might be able to perceive light, but there's this narrative that unless you're completely blind, then you're faking it or lying or whatever. And so I can just team up with people who are blind and do a Smarter in Seconds about blindness. Yeah. And now I get to learn. Now they get to learn. And then I get paid for that. Wow. Awesome. Yeah. That episode wasn't sponsored, but it helps me get other things sponsored.
Yeah, of course.
And it's just really fun because...
Well, it's giving people a platform to talk about things that don't necessarily always have the opportunity to have a platform. And it's giving people really digestible and tangible facts that people can then take with them and be like, I didn't think about that. And now I can introduce that next time that comes up in a conversation.
And I think winning arguments is one of the best public services that Smarter in Seconds provides. When people are like, why shouldn't we celebrate Thanksgiving? Oh, well, my friend Blair has this 90-second video explaining all of it with the Wampanoag Chappaquiddick Nation, who are actually the people who encountered the Pilgrims. And yeah, so it's really fun. And I just think the biggest impact of it is bringing joy to education and bringing a wide array of education to people and doing it in a way where it's stigma and judgment free.
When you look back in 80 years' time and you look back on all the things that you've done, what's the impact that you hope to make?
My gosh, in 80 years' time, will be 111. So maybe science will come that far.
It will be. I'm manifesting it.
What was the question? So I was just thinking about the math.
You're like, what do they? When you look back on this time period or just the trajectory of your life, what is the impact that you want to leave?
I hope that I help people I want to bring a little sunshine to everybody's day. And that's kind of hard to measure. But I try to be somebody when maybe somebody meets me once and they're like, oh, she was really nice. Yeah. Or not just maybe about me, but like maybe I showed them about something about themselves that's positive, because I think that's the best impact. And I think I'd love to have Smarter in Seconds turn into like a textbook series for kids, or, you know, a TV show, because I was raised on things like PBS, and I think we need more of that in the world. Everything you said is just so enlightening, and I love it. So at the end of every episode, and this is perfect segue because we were just talking about Smarter in Seconds, at the end of every episode I ask funsy questions, because I know we talk about, you know, deeper things, so I'm like, we got to end it on a fun, you know. Let's say that Smarter in Seconds has a chaotic cousin, and we said it's messier in minutes. I have a chaotic cousin, so that's hilarious. So let's say you started like a chaotic cousin version, and it's messy in minutes. What would be your topic that you would love to talk about? First of all, I'm upset I didn't hear this idea until right now, because I was trying so hard to figure out how I could talk about the Kendrick Drake beef on Smarter in Seconds. I was like, can I do a Smarter in Seconds on rap beef? And like we like did the numbers, it's just not going to make sense in the format, because then you're going to have to start covering other stuff. There you go. So it would have been the Kendrick Drake beef. I love watching like commentary channels on YouTube so much. Okay, a lot of that. And I think it could be like almost a rival to Drama Alert, like messier minutes, but I think it could also be fun things like hype or not. Like if I go to a restaurant, like an Instagram famous restaurant, like can I judge whether it's hype or whether it's BS? I love that, because you never know these days. I just realized that these are all stuck together. You never know if they're... You really don't. Wow, this place looks super aesthetically pleasing, but the food's trash. I've realized that with Los Angeles, and I don't know if that's just my experiences so far, but the places that are very beautiful and the food it's just kind of mid. But the places that don't look cute, the food is fire. Yeah, so 100%. That's the hard part about it. Okay, and then the other question. If you want to learn more about me, I'm Blair Imani. That's at BlairImani. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, Threads, YouTube Shorts, and I have a podcast that's available to subscribe to called Thoughts About Feelings. And that's a wrap on this episode of She Comes With Baggage. If you love this conversation, please make sure to follow She Comes With Baggage on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube for more content and behind-the-scenes moments. And if you're tuning in on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any other audio platform, please don't forget to leave a review. I love hearing from you, and your support helps keep these conversations going. And just remember, if you are carrying any baggage, you're not alone, and we're all more alike than we might realize. See you soon.